and welcome to Rock Painting Workshops. And this lesson we're going to do a lion for our colouring in rock. And again, I'll go through the process with you step by step. We're going to just take a regular graphite pencil to sketch the lion on the rock, and you can see I've put a vertical line down the middle, and I'm just drawing his face now, and I'm sort of getting it equal-ish from left to right side of the line, the vertical line down the middle of the rock. And I'm just going to pop his ears on, so they are usually about the same distance away from the middle of the vertical line. And here just putting in his face details, the nose, muzzle, the mouth and the eyes. Then I'm just going to draw in the frill around the lion's mane. So I'm just going to do some sort of curvy lines there and just put in what's sort of going to be his body. As soon as you've sketched on the rock and you've got the line that you're happy with, then you can use a permanent marker to create the colouring in line. Okay, sometimes I lean my rock on other rocks just to give it that slight angle, because we are looking at it straight up and down on the camera, but when I create every day at my desk, I've actually got a table that is facing the rock towards me, because only then will you get a better look at your image, because otherwise the rock's facing straight up to the roof. But if you can just face it towards you, you've got a better idea of what's going on. And you can see why I call everything ish, so it's even-ish, because you can see my lion is not even. But that's okay, he's pretty cool. Alright, so I've let the permanent pen dry. It only takes about a minute or so. And now I'm just going to erase the pencil lines. I'm just going to take all that off. Sometimes it can go a little bit smudgy at first, depending on what kind of rock you're using. But the eraser does pick up all the graphite lines on it. Just get rid of all the eraser residue. It's all clean, ready to go. Now I'm just going to choose the line colours. I've got the orange, yellow and brown that I'm going to do the colours in. And what I'm going to do is create the first base layer of colour. Now, depending on your rock will be how much soaks into the rock, and you might get quite an uneven look on the first layer. Don't keep painting it wet, okay? Just do a thin, even layer across the whole thing and let it dry. Doesn't matter if it's all uneven and seems a bit sort of all over the place. That's okay. We're just creating the base layer here by putting in that thin layer. If you try to go too thick on this layer, like too thick too quickly, like you want the end result, not this first result that we're getting, all you're doing is the paint will start drying while you're still pushing the pen around, and parts of the paint will just sort of get caught on the nib, and that leads to blockages and all sorts of pen problems. So you're better off just doing that first layer. We'll have a look at that in a minute. So we'll just keep adding the colours that we want to use to it. You can already see on the face bit as it's drying that it hasn't got the even coverage yet, so don't worry about that. I just want to can't really say just throw another layer of paint on the brown around the frill. Okay, you can just paint or colour another layer of paint using the brown. We'll do the frill. Yeah, so as we created the beginning black line, a lot of people are like, oh, you got to be really careful because it's the final line, but it's not. Just like a children's colouring in book, it is just the outline so we know where we're going to place all our colour. Okay, later on we're going to go over with a final line of the acrylic black paint. But for now, it's just so we know where we go. It's really hard to just take the colour straight onto the rock and start drawing your image. So just putting that in place first is a great place to start. And of course, as you get more experienced with your drawing and painting on your rocks, you might even skip this step and just go straight on to painting onto your rock. The thing is, to get that level of confidence, first we have to play around and just start creating on the rocks. Then as we go, we just get more and more confident to try new things. So just getting that first layer of colour in. I just like using that first layer of colour as the base for the whole rock. Okay, and here we've got 2 layers of colour. I didn't bore you with the process of colouring it in all over again, and we're about to do some shading. So I've got some clean water, I've got my microfiber cloth, and I've got my paintbrush, and I've just scribbled a little bit of the brown paint onto the line, and I've dipped the paintbrush into the clear water, and I've just wiped off any excess water onto the microfiber. And now I'm just smushing that bit of colour around. I've probably added a touch too much water there, but that's okay, we can come back to it in a minute. Now remember, if you're not using paint pens and you're using paint, it's exactly the same process, right? You would have just painted a nice thin even line of acrylic paint, layer of acrylic paint over your line. You would have let it dry for a minute or so. You would have done a second coat, and you would be shading just the same as you are now. You'd just be putting a dash of paint on where I'm putting the paint pen, because the paint pens I am using are acrylic paint. So just with the brush, you're just smushing that around. I'm not too fussy with the colouring. It's just to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of interest to the rock. I don't want to be spending hours on sort of like getting it right or taking it to the extreme, because these are drop rocks. I like to make as many as I can in the hour, because my goal is to get them down the park for the kids to find after school. So, if I can spend 15 minutes on creating one of these rocks, I'm really happy with that. If I'm creating an art rock, I might spend hours on it. Okay, just smush that in. You can see I've just added a little bit more brown onto the neck. Okay, so now we're going to put in the final outline colour. So I've got my black acrylic paint pen. There's a couple of different brands that are really good to use in this, and I'm using the Posca 0.7. There's also Artistro and Tuli Art brands. They're really good in this size as well to do your outlines. Probably out of all the paint pens, they're the 3 brands I like to use the most. I've tested them so much now. They are the best for sealing, for putting, outside, fade resistant, all that kind of thing. Is those 3 brands of pen are the best for rock painting. There's heaps of information about paint pens and how to get them to work, and if they're not working right for you, there's a lot of troubleshooting. You can just go to our rockpaintingworkshops.com website, and I'll help you with that. So many questions, and there's so many pages there with lots of information for you to have a look at, videos and pictures. So you can see I've just done all the outlines now. I'm going to pop his mouth in, add his whiskers, and put his eyes in place. And there's the black pen on the rock. Okay, I'm just going to grab my white pen now and put in some highlights. So like I've been sharing with you on the other rocks, it's just where you think the sun or the light would bounce off the edges of the line. We're going to put some dots and dashes in white. And again, it adds the interest, makes it a little bit cuter to look at. those around his frill. Some dots in the eyes. Remember putting them on the same side, off to the left of both eyes. Okay. Just going to add some little decorations around the edges. I just use my paint pen to put the small dots in place. You don't have to do this bit. I just felt like filling up the rock a little bit, a bit more colour. And that's it, he's done. So don't forget, paint your lines, come over to our Facebook page and share the lines that you've created with us. And that's over at Reef Rock's free workshops on Facebook. I can't wait to see your line.